Kumlang and the Black Gemara today. Tuesday's Gemara is the Pei Hey Amid Aleph. So basically, the last thing we learned was that Rabbi Yehuda came along and said the name of Rav, that even though a kohen is not allowed to marry a woman who is a zayin and a halal and all that, but a bas kohen is permitted to marry anybody who's kosher. Doesn't matter the man is a halal. Doesn't matter if it's a criteria for bas kohen. It's not a problem. Then we also introduced another idea, which is that where a kohen is not allowed to marry a woman who is a zayin or a halala or a giyadis, that iser is not only on the kohen. That iser also applies to the woman, because we know hukish ish from Rabbi Shmuel said isha yisha, that everything is the same. That they have the same, when it comes to loisa, so they all have equal averis, and therefore it's equally an aver for the kohen as it is for the giyadis or for the halal or whatever it is. So now we're discussing this other idea, but a bas kohen doesn't have any regulations, any restrictions on who she can marry, as long as they're kosher to be married. So we're up to the Gemara here. Pop over about 6 lines at the top of the page. 6 lines on the top of the page. And we learn out from, it says, lo yikhu, and we learn out okay. That the possible kochel, there we learn out that she has the same avera as the man if he's a kohen and he's on marry a gay. For example, she has avera also marrying him. And why we needed a special limit is because by Tumah we say that the bas kohen is different. So we would have thought maybe in this thing as well. Partial that no, she shoulders the same avera. The Gemara continues about this theme. If a bas kohen can marry anybody, or she also has the same restrictions, that equal the ones came into they once came to the town into I said that into the city, the region of Idabaravit. Boyum and Ayu, they were asked this question. Who's Aruk Shadis Liinase Lipsulin Oiloi? When it comes to a bas kohen who's kosher, does she also have the same restrictions that who she can marry or not? Like a kohen. Papa said, I'll tell you what, Tennessee. I believe that she doesn't have the same restrictions, and I'll prove it to you. We learned in Kedushin, it says, sorry, Bavel, when Ezra came, he took out from Bavel all the different kinds of people, all the different categories of people, so that Bavel was cleansed and everybody there was now Yuchas as a Yisrael. Who did he take with him from Bavel? He took with him Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim, Chalolim, Kohen that was a Chalol, his parents. It was a kohen who married a grusha, let's say, Gadim, Becharudim, Avodim, that was set free, were about 10 lines on the top of the page. And we're still discussing whether a bas kohen has restrictions who she can marry. So our Papa is going to prove from this Mishnah that she has no restrictions. Zaidim and Nesinim and Shtuki. Shtuki is a child that was found. We have no idea. Shtuki is that we know who the mother is. We don't know the father. When the child goes around asking who's my father, they silence him. And Asufi is a kid gathered up. We have no idea who any of the parents are, either parents. So the rule is follows, the Mishnah says. Kohenim, Levim, Yisraelim, that bracket of Kohenim, Yisraelim, with total of that they all can marry each other. Levim, Yisraelim, if you start from Levim, then you go Yivaim, Yisrael, Chalolim, Gadim, Charudim, an Eved that was set free. They're Mutorin, Love, Zebazeh. A lady can marry a Geyadis, they all can marry each other, no problem. Then the next bracket, Gede, Charude. Gadim are not part of the kol, so they have a wider reach in who they can marry. So they cannot marry a kohen, but Gadim, Charudi, Mamzeh, they can marry a mamzer. Nesine, Shtuke, Vasufe, Mutarin, Lovi, Zebazeh. They can all marry each other. The ilu kohen is the chol tani. It doesn't say here that a woman, a kohen, can marry a chol. So the Papa wants to prove from here that you see that a kohen has the same restrictions as a kohen. Otherwise, it would put another category called kohanos and say that a kohanos can marry a cholol. So you want to say that's what Papa trying to prove. He's trying to disagree with Rabbi. He wants to say that it's forbidden for a bas kohen to marry a cholol, just like it's forbidden for a kohen to marry a chalala. Says the Gemara, no. It doesn't prove anything. I can argue that a bas kohen 100% can marry a chol, but everything here in the Mishnah is learning both ways: a man to a woman and a woman to a man. Since a kohen cannot marry a chol, so therefore the flip side, if you want to say that a bas kohen can marry, why doesn't the Mishnah mention a bas kohen can marry a chol? Because the opposite of that would be that a kohen could marry a chalala, but since that cannot be, a kohen cannot marry a chalala. Therefore, the Mishnah didn't learn it because you don't have both sides. That's the only reason why. It doesn't prove anything. Kol heicha dahani not b'hani, but b'hani, only if it works both ways. Telling the Mishnah includes that. In other words, a Yisrael can marry a gay, a bas gay, or a Giyadis, and a gay can marry a bas Yisrael. So therefore, it works both ways. Kohen, even the male Kohen wants to marry a halala, can't. So you only want that the bas Kohen should marry a halala. The Mishnah doesn't go one way. Like Tanya doesn't mention it. It proves nothing. So they continued having this argument. So Papa and Rav Huna ben Yeshua, who were very good friends, Rav Papa disagreed with Rav Huna ben Rav. He said that a bas Kohen also has restrictions, and Rav Huna ben Yeshua agreed with Rav Huna ben Rav that a bas Kohen has no restrictions. So also the comment of Rav Huna, they came before Rav Huna ben Rav, and heard about this discussion. He said to them, "Dadiki, my little children, Hachi Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav." Rav Yehuda said the name of Rav. Could be they didn't hear about it. Lehuzeruk Sheidas the Nasl of Psalm. There are no restrictions for a bas Kohen who she can marry, and therefore she can marry a ger, she can marry a chol, all of that. Even though ideally a bas Kohen should marry a Kohen, like we said before, so there's mitzvah, it doesn't matter. It's the Anyway, then the Mishnah said that also we have shnias medivri sefer. We brought another whole category of people where it's forbidden to the husband but permitted to the brother-in-law, and shnias. Shnias was, for example, your grandmother, either your mother's mother, or your father's mother, or a great-granddaughter, or the daughter-in-law of your son, the daughter-in-law of your daughter. And then the Mishnah concludes that all of those Isurim which are Osam Mahatayda, she's still entitled to Ksuva. But all of those Isurim which are only Osam Rabbanan, she forfeits her Ksuva, and she doesn't have any payers, any benefits. That means everything that he ate, that is, even though they weren't supposed to be married, everything that he ate over the years from Nichsim Malak, he doesn't have to reimburse her at all. And even though he doesn't have to redeem her if she now gets, all the obligations fall to the side. And also it said there's no more mezainis, no more feeding. I think Gemara looks where that is. Now the Gemara is going to know, so we'll see what's going on here. Why is it that when it comes to the Isa of the Torah, we allow her? We're much more relaxed. And when it comes to the Isa of the Rabbanan, we come down so hard that she forfeits and all that. And the Gemara will give us a number of reasons, but first, there's the Gemara, B'nai Bidim and Avsheshes. The Trula Bidi asks an interesting question. What happens, Shnia Lebal, the Loi Shnia Liyav? What happens? She's forbidden to the husband. For example, Reuben and Shimon are half brothers, and Reuben married his grandmother, which is forbidden with the Rabbanan. But if he dies, Shimon is allowed to marry her because it's not his grandmother. He has a different grandmother on the mother's side. So what happens if she's forbidden to her husband, but not forbidden to brother-in-law? Now we said in the Mishnah, if she's forbidden to her husband, she forfeits her ksuva. But now when her husband dies and she marries a brother-in-law, does she regain her ksuva because she's allowed to live with the brother-in-law? So the question is, Gemara explained, the brother-in-law is just stepping into the Reuben's shoes. It's Reuben's ksuva, and therefore she lost it, forfeited it. Or now, since if Reuben doesn't have any assets, we move to Shimon, therefore it's really Shimon's ksuva, and then she is entitled to it. Gemara wants to know. Is she entitled to ksuva from her brother-in-law? No. Do we say, given that ksuva comes from Reuben's assets, is Lesla, therefore she forfeited, and it remains forfeited? Ideal, perhaps given the ilu Lesla if Reuben has no assets, then she's entitled to receive assets from her new husband, from the brother-in-law. Then maybe Isla. It's not like he's stepping into Reuben's shoes. He's independent from Reuben, and therefore she's entitled. Amaluhu, Rav Sheisha said to Nesua, didn't we learn it? It says Ksuba saw al nifsei ba'ilarish. It says clearly that the assets come from the first husband. The im hoisa shnia lebal, and let's say if she was forbidden to her husband, it says clearly even from a brother-in-law she doesn't receive any. So it's clear cut that she does not get from Shimon either. Since the Shimon is really just stepping into Reuben's shoes, and even though if he has to give a ksuva later from his own, if Reuben doesn't have any assets, but still he's stepping into Reuben's shoes and she's forbidden to Reuben, she forfeits a ksuva. However, the Bryce, now we're going to digress, the Bryce of wording is a little bit odd because it starts off saying that all the assets come from Reuben, and then it says, and if it was forbidden to Reuben, then she doesn't get from Shimon. But Shimon doesn't, you just said it comes from Reuben. Where does Shimon come in? Just because he married Shimon, but the assets are from Reuben. So what do you mean she doesn't get from Shimon? Miklal, the Ika, the Islam, that sometimes she does get from Shimon. So you're right. A few words are missing here. This is how you should learn it. That the assets come, the Huksuva comes from Reuben, the first husband. The first one doesn't have any assets, then she turns to this new husband and she takes from him, from the brother-in-law. But if she's forbidden to Reuven, then I feel the Yavam, she doesn't get anything from the brother-in-law either, because the brother-in-law steps into Reuven's shoes. Next question is, the Mishnah says, if what the Issa that they're doing is an Issa the Tatum, she doesn't forfeit her ksuva. So the question is, okay, she doesn't forfeit her ksuva, but is she entitled to some of the other benefits, like mezainis? Blame it on the the question. Almana, the Kohen Gadol, the situation where a Kohen Gadol married Almana with his Naveira, Gerusha, Chalus Venhedyer, or a Vasi, or a Chalus Venhedyer, Yesh Lahen Mezainis. Okay, she's entitled to ksuva, but does she also have mezainis? Does she also get provided for? Or ain't Lahen Mezainis? She does not get provided for. She must say, hey, what are we talking about? What do you mean they have? Ilema the Yasa to say they're living together, and the question is whether as a husband he's obligated to provide for her. The answer is definitely no. We don't want them to stay married. We want them to leave. We want them to divorce. We're trying to get them to divorce. We're going to make a takana that he should provide for her. Mezainis Isla, you think she's entitled to mezainis? So what's the question? What happens if he went overseas? The husband overseas and forgot or didn't leave anything behind. And what she did was, so she went out there and she borrowed money, and therefore she had what to eat. The question is whether the husband has to come back and reimburse that person. Do we say mezainet tanai ksubadinu? Mezainet is one of the in the ksuba. It says that she will be azen, that I will feed her. So because it's part of the ksuba and she's entitled to the ksuba, so therefore she's entitled to these provisions. Midi isla ksuba isla mezainet. So therefore this balchoiv can go to the husband and collect, to get reimbursed. Or maybe a ksuba maybe a ksuba, which the whole idea of ksuba is, when do you get a ksuba? Upon leaving the marriage, either through divorce or through death. So ksuba, when you leave the marriage, we're happy to give her something, but move on. We want to encourage her to divorce. But mezainih, deal with the but mezainih, we don't want to give her at all, because all it does is it prolongs the sin. Why in the world will we help them out? So that's the question. Is he entitled mezainih or not? Any other woman, if she would have done that, if the husband went overseas and the husband is entitled to give her money and he didn't come back, and he went away for a while, she went and borrowed. She can borrow. She borrowed money from the Bachay. The Bachay then goes back to the wife and says to the wife, "You owe me $100 for the money that I spent on you." And then the wife turns around to the husband and says, "You owe me this," and therefore she can get it back. But over here, what's the deal? Amalei, so the answer was less. She's not entitled to mezainis. We don't want to do anything to encourage her to remain married to him. We want to make her life as difficult as possible while they're married, so that they should divorce. Says the Gemara, but Tani, but there's another brayso, yes, that she is entitled to mezainis. If the husband died already, so there's no longer an isser involved, then she does have mezainis as long as she is a widow, like any other widow. That it says in Ksuba, I will continue to provide for you because it's part of the Ksuba. And there's no any more prohibition, but they might stay longer together. He's dead. So then we help her out. There's another little version, Amalei, he just asked directly the question. Tanya Yeshla, it says clearly she is entitled to mezainis. And it doesn't make sense. The question was not a contradictory question, it doesn't make sense. We want them to divorce. Why in the world would she be entitled to mezainis? He says back to Velo Tanya Yeshla, but the fact is it says in the Brayso that she is entitled to mezainis. Must be Kitanya Hilacha Misa, after the person died. She's entitled to paydays. She's entitled to paydays, and she's also entitled to mezainis. She's entitled to mezainis and beloyas. Beloyas are the rotten clothing. She gets everything back. Anything, the nichset barzel, she gets back whatever is there, and so on. Bihi psula. And she is possible below the psula. If a mona marries a kohen gadol, she became a halala, and the child is a halal. She can no longer marry a kohen. And if she's a grusha, marries a kohen hedja, she becomes now a halala. And the biggest problem is not so much about her. She anyway couldn't marry a kohen. So children now become a halala. And we force them to divorce because they're living in sin. What about shniyas? When it comes to shniyas, which is only midrabbanan, marrying your grandmother, is only midrabbanan. Here it's much worse. We come down like a ton of bricks. Ain't look ksuba, she forfeits a ksuba. Loy paydas, she doesn't have the paydas, veloy beloyas. She doesn't have no, paydas means the dividends that all the years that he ate, the dividends, he doesn't have to reimburse her. And veloy beloyas, if let's say there are any clothes left that are old and rubbed out, and so on and so forth, that she brought into the marriage, she does not take it back. These are all part of penalties. On the one hand, on the other hand, the hik sheda, the grandmother, for example, if the grandson died, she can now marry a kohen. She's still kosher because it didn't only the rabbanon. This one doesn't in any way turn into halala. And the kosher, the child is kosher, and according to Moses Shainim, the child can even marry a kohen. But we force them, we coerce them to divorce. Let's understand the logic. Why is it? Amon the kohen gadol, which is such a harsh avera, yeshla ksuba, she has a ksuba. And why is it that when it comes to the shniyas, there's only midrabanan, and we come down like a ton of bricks, no ksuba, nothing. So he says, you know why? In the case of the Amon kohen gadol, there are other punishments that are taking place that work as a disincentive, and that is that the kohen gadol himself becomes possible, and in other words, not that he becomes possible, that he possible while they're married, he cannot serve in the Beis Hamikdash. So it impacted on him. She became a halala, and the children are affected. The children are halalim. The chomakim shehu possible and whenever he is possible, konso Isaac Suba. That we decided we'll give them we'll punish him. We'll say to the husband, too bad, since you both impacted, give a ksuba. You got to give a ksuba. But in the case of shnias, what's the impact? There's no side effects. He remains kosher if he marries his grandmother. He remains kosher if he's a kohen, he continues avodah. She remains kosher, he doesn't come a halala, and the children are all right. We need to give a disincentive. So we have no choice. We have to penalize the ksuba. Where there are other impacts, other side effects, we don't have to then take away the ksuba. If and more than that, we're going to punish him, then he has to give it a ksuba. But where there are no side effects, where it's only us as Rabbanon, we have to do something to give them as disincentive to remain together. So therefore, we forfeit the ksuba. That's what he says. Come on, we'll give a whole bunch of other reasons. Rebbe says, I'll tell you simply, halal divrei Torah, that's also mahatayra for a kohen gadol to marry an almana or a kohen hedjed to marry a divorcee. The divrei Torah ain't tzir chizuk. Torah doesn't need our help, and people generally, avoid doing aveiros to the Torah. But the halal divrei sefer. But when it comes to marrying a grandmother, it's only midrabanan, and there we need help. The divrei sefer tzir chizuk. People sometimes, dismiss Isur and Rabbanu. They don't take it that seriously. So therefore, we need to come down like a ton of bricks. That's what Rebbe says. A third explanation, very interesting. Zehu margila v'zuhi margil toy. In the case of Amana Kohen Gadol, a Grusha Kutzor in Heged, she has everything to lose. By marrying this guy, she now is a halala. Her children will be impacted at halalim. So she has no interest in marrying this guy and ruin her reputation and ruin her future generations. So why did she marry? It must be that he, as a man, liked her, fell in love with her, and therefore he is the one who seduced her. So because he seduced her, and therefore he has to pay out the ksuba, penalizing him. But in the case of only us as Rabbanon, where there's no impact on her and there's no impact on future generations, then we believe that probably she seduced him. She enticed him to go ahead with his marriage, or at least equal to him. She enticed him, and therefore she should be punished as she forfeits her ksuba. Says the Gemara. This last explanation we gave, Mantonula, who's the one who actually said it? Who's the author of this? Some say Rab Shimon Elazar Tani. It was actually Rab Shimon Elazar who said it. The first opinion, and he's explaining. Why did we say that if it's a kosher and a ksheda, they lose the ksuba? If it's a pasal psula, we don't lose the ksuba. The reason is because who is the cause here? Who's the catalyst for this aveda? Who possibly psula? Why is it that they're both possible konsul oisa that he gets penalized? So they has to give a ksuba. Because in that case where she is impacted, we believe that he was the catalyst, he's the one who made it happen, and that he was an enabler, and therefore he should be punished. Why is it who kosher if everybody's kosher konsul oisa? Why she get penalized? That he guilty. Where there's no impact, we believe that she's the one who induced him to marry. Therefore, she forfeits the ksuba. But others say it was Rebbe who said it. Rebbe Tanuma. And what's bothering you, Rabbi? He already gave us a good answer. He said that anything to do with the Torah, we don't need any extra support, but it's only Isur Rabbanan the extra support. So Mona says, Rabbi learned it, but Chalutza Kokashale. And Rabbi was bothered. Chalutza is only Asam Rabbanan. How's it fit into my rule? I gave a rule that all those things which are Asam HaTorah, she does not forfeit a ksuba, don't need any help. All those Asr Rabbanan, she forfeits a ksuba. So how come it says in the Mishnah, Grusha the Chalutza? Chalutza is only Nisa the Rabbanan. And yet by Chalutza, she does not forfeit a ksuba. Why not? It doesn't fit into what I just said. So Rebbe is asking a question on himself. The Chalutza Gakashle, oh, Chalutza the Rabbanan, yet Visa ksuba, Hadarama, therefore explains, Kivan the Pasul law, since that these Pasul, for example, from Truma, Midrabanan, as a Chalutza, she now is cannot marry a kohen, and therefore she cannot get any truma. So therefore she's being hurt by it. So if she's being hurt by it, who's the one who probably made this happen? Who's the catalyst? Probably he, not her, because anytime that she loses out of it, she wouldn't be interested. She'll find somebody else. So it must be he's the one who convinced her to join, and therefore he has to pay the ksuba. Zehu magila, but there's all other cases which are asad rabbanan and doesn't impact her at all. He margilta. She was the one who convinces it. Says the Gemara. Says the Gemara. At the end of the day, what's different? Which reason it is? Whether it's matayin rabbanan or whether he convinces her, him or kosher us. What's the difference in outcome? So there's a number of nafkaminas halacha. What about a mamzeres and an asina to Yisrael? There's a difference. Mandama, the one who says that the whole criteria is the raisa. If there's nisa the raisa, you still get your ksubas or hanami the raisa. So if a Yisrael marries a woman as a mamzeres, she's still entitled to her ksuba, if like Rebbe. But Mandam, but Shimon Lazar says with nature, who magila, if the reason is because he seduced her here, he magla here, in this case here, if for example she's a mamzeres, marrying Yisrael, she has nothing to lose, she's mamzeres anyway, so therefore she is going to seduce him. What about the fact is that her children will be mamzerim, so she's creating mamzerim, it does impact on her. Why would she be interested? So she's like this, because her children can be fixed up. Because we learned before that Rab Tarfon said, if she has a son, that son can then go ahead and marry a shivcha and have a child, and then set that child free, and that child will be back a Yisrael. So therefore, it doesn't. She's interested in marrying a Yisrael. She personally has nothing to lose. And her grandchildren will be full-fledged Yidden. That's how she fixes up her Yidden, her children. So she has an incentive to marry the guy. And therefore, she would lose her ksuba according to that reason. Says the Gemara, okay, what about Ablezer? What about Ablezer, who disagrees with Tarfon? He holds that even if you marry a shivcha and he set him free, the child is a mamzer in his own right, so she doesn't gain anything by marrying the person. So then there's no nafkamil halacha. Both of them would say, well, it's Isa the Raisa. She has no reason to seduce him, nothing to gain by marrying this guy. So just produce more mamzedim. Therefore, she's entitled to ksuba kod Rabbalez. But bless them, and mamzer holad margalev, meaning she's not going to convince him because she has nothing to gain. I'll tell you where there's enough kamil halacha. What about Marzir Gilushasai? What about, let's say you take back your divorced wife. Your divorced wife married somebody else, and then something happened, they got divorced again, or the person died, and now you want to take her back. And we learned before, you're not allowed to take her back. Once you married somebody else, you cannot take her back. But you did. So you committed an Isa in the Torah. Grusha Mishnika Benayo. So Mandam, the one who says that I said that if you didn't Isa the Torah, you don't forfeit your ksuba, fine. You don't forfeit ksuba. Hanami Raisa. Here's also the Torah. Then you don't forfeit ksuba. But a man who magila, that the only reason is because when there's an Isser in the Torah and the Val and an impact on her, he is the one who enabled her, he's the one who's the catalyst. He margale over here, she has nothing to lose, she's a divorcee anyway. And so therefore she comes back and the children are all right. So therefore she's the one who, even though it's Isa the Raisa, it's her idea. She's the one who convinced them, at least equally, they're both equally responsible, and therefore she forfeits ksuba. Well, Rabbi Akiva, the Amma, yes, Mamzim b'chayav ilav. And Rabbi Akiva said, yes, she has what to lose out, because even though it's only a lav, Rabbi Akiva holds the child's a mamzer, so she has no incentive to go back to marry her husband, because if she has any new children, it'll be mamzedim. It must be the husband who convinced her. So why again? There's no difference in halacha. She'll still get her ksuba, whether the reason is about title, the reason is because who convinced who. Hold Margot label. I mean, she's not going to do it. Ella, Papa, I'll give you another difference. According to that opinion, according to Kiva, Kohen Gadol has to marry a psula. What happened? The girl was not a psula, not a virgin, and she was a single girl, but she was not a psula. So Kohen Gadol in this case only does an Isa the Torah, but an Asay. And by an Asay, the children are Mamzedim. So therefore, if the idea is Mahatayra, then here's Mahatayra as well, and therefore she's entitled to Ksubah. But if it's a question of who to lose to, and since over here she has nothing to lose, because it's only an Asay, the children are Mamzedim. And anyway, she's a bull, so she can't marry Kohen Gadol. Yeah. And there's no Zayn over here. She's not a Zaina, so therefore she could marry a Kohen Hedyot afterwards if the husband dies. So therefore she doesn't impact her negatively at all. So she's the one who does him. That's why she forfeits a ksubah. Here you have a difference. So she does not forfeit a ksubah. Isa the Torah Isra Asay. Because she convinces him. In this case here, it's the reason because he convinced her, but in this case here, she convinced him because even though it's Asamatay, it doesn't impact her at all. The children are not mamzedim. Says yeah, but there's an opinion that says the children are. And according to Rezman Yaakov, yes, say okay, it's not mamzedim. However, the children, even though it's an asay, will become a cholol. Therefore, it does impact on her, and therefore she's not interested. He seduced her again. She should not forfeit her ksubah. So what's the difference? She's not going to convince him. Anything that impacts her negatively, either her or her children, she's not going to be interested in. Even if she remain alone, she'd rather remain alone than to commit the sin. Rashi says, and they say that the man is much more impulsive when it comes to he can't control his urges, and therefore he ignores the sin a lot more than she does. She doesn't have those strong urges, and she wants to make sure that her family remains pure. So he'll be seducing her. Elo Rabashi, I'll tell you the case here is that his wife, he warned her, and then she was in, and it had to be discreet with somebody, and she was, and now they have to go ahead and she has to drink water, and then he had relations with her, or he takes her back and he lives with her. There's an Aveda there in the Torah as well, because it says twice, V'nitma, she's forbidden to adulterer and also forbidden to her original husband. So, but it's Isa the Torah. Therefore, she gets a ksuvah. Here, she's happy. What do you call it? It makes no difference here anyway, and therefore she's happy to go back to the husband. She'll convince him. Says the Gemara, Ramasi ben Cheredama. Ramasi ben Chered says, I feel a hola baila lahashkoisa, even if the husband's on the way to the base of Mikdash with her to drink the water. And then they had relations on the way. Asa Zaina, and he'd made her a Zaina, so she now became a Zaina. So therefore, she's not going to be interested in being involved with the husband because she's a Zaina. It impacts on her that even if the husband dies, she can no longer marry a Kohen. So therefore, and anything that negatively impacts on her, she's not interested. She'll drink the water and prove her innocence. This way, she's not possible a Kohen. Says the Gemara, Rashi, Soita Vada Ike Benayo. Soita Vada means a married woman who committed adultery. We have witnesses, everything else. So therefore, because in this case over here, she has to leave her husband, and she's not allowed to go back to her husband. But if she does go back to her husband, the children will not be mamzedim. Rashi says even according to Rabbi Akiva, he admits in this particular case, going back to her own husband, the children will not be mamzedim. Therefore, it doesn't impact on her negatively. So she might be interested in going back to her original husband. So she will convince him, and therefore she forfeits the ksuvah. But if you just look at the perspective of the Torah, it's from the Torah, and therefore she does not lose the ksuvah. Talking about further, next Mishnah, we already had this before, but Bas Yisrael, if a Yisrael, a Bas Yisrael is engaged to a Kohen, even though Mahatayla she can eat Truma, but Mirabana she cannot eat Truma because the kid should bring it back home, or because maybe he'll find some defects there and say the whole Kedusha was based on an error. Or Muberes, the Kohen, she's married to a Kohen and she's pregnant and the Kohen died. But she is pregnant, so she cannot eat yet because the child wasn't born. Once the child is born, she can eat on account of the child, but the child wasn't born. So we had before that a uber is oichel ve'ena meichel, cannot make someone else eat. Shemeres yavam lekoyin. Let's say her husband died and she's in waiting for her brother, but she didn't marry her brother yet. So even though she's going to marry a kohen, she cannot eat right now. Likewise, a bas kohen. That's talking about bas Yisrael. What about a bas kohen li Yisrael? If she's engaged to Yisrael, she already forfeits her truma, like teichel, but truma shuni truma. What about a bas Yisrael mures Levi? That was a kohen. A bas Yisrael is engaged to a Levi, or right? Now we're going to learn the Gemara. According to us, anybody can eat meiser. That we give the 10% to a Levi. However, the Meir holds that only a Levi and a Kohen can eat meiser, not a Yisrael. So we're following here at Meir. A Bas Yisrael engaged to a Levi, she cannot eat meiser. She might bring it home and they're not allowed to eat it. Or she might turn out to be that marriage is based on a false premise. And Muberes Malevi, or she's pregnant from a Levi, the husband died, and now she's pregnant, she cannot eat meiser until the child is born. According to Rameir. Shemer is Yevon Levi, she's waiting for her husband, the brother-in-law who's a Levi, he cannot eat till she marries. Bas Levi, Yisrael, she was a Bas Levi, she can eat meiser, now she's engaged to Yisrael, that's it. She's not eating meiser. And that's what the Gemara will explain. So, Bas Levi, Moires is Lekoin, if a Bas Levi is engaged to a Kohen, or Muberes, now Bas Levi is engaged to a Kohen, so the moment she got engaged, but she's not married to a Kohen yet. So she's not allowed to eat anymore. She cannot eat truma as a kohen, nor can she eat meiser as a bas Levi because she's engaged to a kohen. We're going to explain that later. And muberes mekohen, the same thing, engaged to a kohen, but the kohen died. Now that she has to wait till the child is born. Shemeres yavim look, she's waiting to marry kohen or bas kohen Levi. Thing a bas kohen is engaged to a Levi like teichel, so she should cannot eat late truma v'leiba meiser. All of these cases can't eat truma meiser, just like the case before. So soon see. Says the Gemara. With the hey zor, I don't know what's going on here. You tell me that a bas Yisrael engaged to a Levi cannot eat meiser. Anybody can eat meiser, even if she's not engaged to a Levi. But the hey zor, let it be a Yisrael. Zor milach meiser. Can anybody eat meiser? The author of this Mishnah Meir Amar, he holds meiser rishon also lezorim. He holds that meiser rishon a Yisrael cannot eat it. And where does he know this big chiddush from? Good Tanya, we look in the Brayse. It says truma lekoyin. Truma belongs to the koyin or meiser rishon Levi, and meiser rishon belongs to the Levi. And Rashi learns. So how do we see from here that he holds that meiser rishon is restricted to Levi? Maybe just talking about donations, but because the Brayse is comparing meiser to truma, and we know when it comes to truma, Yisrael cannot eat from truma or Levi. So when it comes to meiser rishon, the Levi, we know that Yisrael cannot eat from meiser. Others try to learn differently, but that's how Rashi learns. How we know. Now, Zaya disagrees. He says matiroi lekoyin. Zaya says, I permit it to a kohen. So before we go any further, what do you mean permit it to a kohen? Matira meklal di command also. Did somebody hold that a kohen cannot eat mice? A kohen is a Levi also. It's called the Shevet Levi. In fact, there's a whole chakira of what's a kohen? Is a kohen a different species altogether, or a kohen is like a Levi but one up? So it seems to me he's a Levi one up. So surely he can eat truma. You can give it. You can give meiser, which is interesting, not only to a Levi, but also to a kohen. My time to Meir. What's the logic of Meir? Why is it that a Yisrael cannot eat from meiser? From a pasuk, it says in the pasuk that it's ma'aseh b'nei Yisrael, that all the meiser the Jewish people give, the 10%, asher yerimu laHashem, that they will donate with the elevate to Hashem, truma, and he calls it truma. I gave it to Levim. Why does the Torah call truma? Ma truma, teach you halacha, just like truma, asur l'zorim, forbidden to a Yisrael. Af meiser rishon, asur l'zorim. So to meiser rishon is forbidden to a Yisrael. If you're going to compare it to truma, let's go further. Ima truma, just like truma, chayav no l'mitzvah, for Yisrael eats truma, the chayav mitzvah from Mishnei Shemayim. So say the same thing by meiser. And the chaimish, that if you eat a kohen's truma, you have to pay a penalty of 25%. Is af meiser, so meiser should be the same thing. Chayav no mitzvah, if Yisrael eats it, he should be chayav mitzvah, which no such thing. And the chaimish, and pay that penalty. On Makra, therefore, we have another pasuk where it says, "Guard my truma," and with the truma, if you eat it, somebody else eats it, they'll die. And it says, "Omeisuboy," they'll die from it. Ki yechalaluhu, because they went ahead and they were mechalal. It says clearly, boy, only truma you're chayav mitzvah shemai, and not what, and not by meiser. And then when it comes to paying that penalty, it says in the pasuk, if a yid eats it, the yosef chamishisoi olav, that you should pay the extra 20% on it. What do you mean on it? And not on meiser. Boy, v'leiba meiser. Allah v'leiba meiser. quickly, but Rabbanan, what do they do with the pasuk that said Rabbanan hold that anybody can eat ma'aser? So what's the comparison to truma? The comparison to truma is as follows: Ma truma tevelis. If you have crop and you didn't set aside the truma, you're not allowed to eat any part of that produce. That entire produce is called tevel, toiv loy. It's not good enough yet. You cannot eat it. You have to first give truma. The same thing is af ma'aserishin nami tevel. Even though you gave truma, if you didn't give ma'aserishin, you cannot eat from that produce. And how do you know that? From the pasuk where it says truma and ma'aser. And Tanya will just finish here because it says. Okay,